I'll go over here.
Hello, hello. All right. Welcome, everybody. Apparently, I have the slide thing, so there we go. Welcome to the talk. It's a beginner level talk, so we won't go into too much heavy technical detail. But Joe, you want to do what we'll cover?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Joe. I'm one of the co-founders of Aztec. Very happy to be here with Andre. I wanted to be a lawyer growing up, so this is probably as close as I'm going to get. But yeah, we're going to go through today kind of an overview of the different CBDC projects that are going on in the world right now. You know, our take on why these are terrible, and kind of look at how maybe these can be redesigned with a privacy focus, using some novel privacy-preserving technologies. Yeah, we'll kind of look at what it would take to launch a CBDC with like strong privacy guarantees on Ethereum, and then we'll do some key takeaways for you to kind of take away.
And yeah, just by way of introduction, I'm Andre, General Counsel. I am, for my sins, a lawyer, and I do not have the technical capability to be in Joe's shoes, so I'm sorry also that you have to listen to a lawyer today talk. But anyways, Joe, you want to do the disclaimer since it's, you want to be a lawyer, so?
Yeah, so yeah, I think first of all, like, we don't endorse kind of like CBDCs in their current form. We'll get onto this in a second, but I think lots needs to change for them to actually be endorsed, and this presentation hopefully is going to go through you know, what it would take to build a CBDC with strong privacy built into it at the core, and use that as like a platform to build kind of a new form of digital cash, and also a base layer for like pure government systems. And yeah, Andre, do you want to take the last point?
Yeah, on the last point, this presentation is a prelude to our report that is going to come out next week. So we're going to launch a 30-plus page report on privacy for CBDCs. So this presentation is effectively an executive summary of that, so and a preview. Right, so let's go on to overview of CBDC projects and what's been happening in the world. As of September 2024, 134 countries were and are exploring CBDC projects. Every G20 country is looking at these projects. All advanced retail CBDC projects are intermediated through banks, so they're not actually, you know, like Ethereum, fully trustless and you know, peer-to-peer. 3 countries have fully launched the CBDC, so the Bahamas, nice and warm, Jamaica, and Nigeria. And the digital yuan, the ECNY, is the largest CBDC pilot in the world and is exponentially growing, as you'll see in a second.
Yeah, I think the key point on this slide is most graphs in crypto are down and to the right. CBDCs are kind of, their adoption is almost exponential. You know, we've got in the center the Nigerian CBDC, which has been around for the longest. And as Andre was saying, the ECNY, relatively new one, but is also seeing exponential growth. So there's uptick here. And kind of, it's about time we have an actual digital currency to play with, and I think this shows the demand. We just need to correct the implementation.
So we see a big rise in CBDCs in interestingly kind of developing countries, and obviously China, which is a very developed country. But some countries do not like CBDCs. In particular, this gentleman here, he has previously said that he will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency, which in the US is called the digital dollar project. And it's a dangerous threat to freedom, not only because it's, you can you know, revoke somebody's money with a click of a button, but you can see every single transaction on chain if you're in the Fed, which is now potentially a dirty word. So,
I'd also just say he's also the first president to mint an NFT, so maybe he'll change his mind after his recent election successes.
We do hope so. So let's go into, we've looked at 134 projects globally. What's the 3 bullet point summary so you don't have to read a 50-page report? The bottom line is existing designs are not good enough. They're intermediated, they rely on existing financial infrastructure to facilitate transactions. They lack privacy. They rely on existing banks to store sensitive financial information. And they lack interoperability. You know, they're not interoperable with the digital, you know, the future of money that we're all working here in the Ethereum ecosystem. And yeah, maybe, you know, we can do better. And I think, you know, Trump may change his mind. You know, he launched that NFT project. He may actually turn around and launch potentially a CBDC as well.
Yeah, I think to kind of sum this up, my take on this is the current set of CBDCs kind of at worst just an iteration of, you know, archaic banking infrastructure. And if we move them on chain without privacy, they're a dystopia. You know, think about every payment you made on the way to get here, your flights, your hotel, all of that's now public because it's in a CBDC. That's not a world that I think anyone in this room wants to live in. So, yeah, without privacy, I think CBDCs are a dystopia. And hopefully the next few slides show that that's not the only way.
That is absolutely not the only way. And today we're going to go over, you know, what a privacy-first CBD design will look like at a high level, at a beginner level. And we'll start with our thesis.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to the drawing board is the first point of the thesis. We have an opportunity to kind of redesign, you know, how money works when people think about CBDCs. And we can kind of redesign cash in the same process. You know, if we don't do this, I think other kind of currencies will come up and replace this. And so governments and institutions really do need to see this as an opportunity to redesign and preserve the status of crypto. And yeah, I think that these kind of like technologies can be private by design. And Ethereum has all the tools today to launch these.
And our second part of the thesis is actually there's a huge opportunity for smaller nations to experiment with really creative and innovative and you know, privacy-first designs. And there's a few kind of benefits that may accrue as a result of that. I think, you know, you look at some countries around the world, for example, in Europe, you have Montenegro, which doesn't even have its own currency. It's actually relying on the euro, but it's not part of the Eurozone. So there's examples of countries around the world where if they would launch such a privacy-first CBDC, they would gain incredible strategic geopolitical advantage and enhance their global presence, not only, you know, physically, but also virtually, to, you know, to kind of elevate them to a new level. And you could also design, I think, these systems so that it's, as that famous saying goes, transparency for the government, privacy for the people. You could account for every single penny being spent by the government, but everybody in the nation could effectively have privacy and have the freedom that comes with that, you know, embedded in their system. And I think the third point, Joe, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think like this third point about actually putting central bank assets on chain. Like we all think like the US dollar is the current global reserve currency, but there isn't like a digital reserve currency. Like what's the one we flee to kind of on chain? Maybe Bitcoin, you know, if its price stays above 50K, people like it. But I think this is an opportunity for countries to actually link real digital assets to a central bank's balance sheet, and that's incredibly exciting. I think the first country to really do this successfully with these kind of tenants built into the CBDC can have a huge opportunity.
So I think when we're talking about privacy-first designs, we need to do a bit of high-level analysis of, well, what privacy-enhancing technology, what PET colloquially, will be the most relevant to such a design. So I'm just going to go quickly through a very fine print, lawyer-written table analyzing various privacy-enhancing technologies, and Joe will kind of maybe give his technical view at the end. But effectively, in our report that's coming out next week, we have a detailed table just analyzing pretty much all of the existing privacy-enhancing technologies, the description of it, whether it's used in production, whether it's interoperable with existing banking infrastructure, whether it's scalable, whether it allows, importantly, which we'll get onto a bit later, privacy-respecting AML compliance. And then finally, and probably most importantly, is this infrastructure trustless? And I think there's a lot of kind of wool being pulled over eyes around this topic, but which technology is the best?
Yeah, and the way we kind of see this is like, all these technologies have their merits and different use cases, but if we want to ensure kind of these four tenets are kind of held in the design of CBDC, we think the only way today is to use zero-knowledge proofs. They've been around for the longest. They're used in production today. People understand them. There's talent in this room, in other rooms in Devcon that know how to use them. They can be used to program compliance into the currency, and they don't involve any third parties. Like, if you trust the maths, you trust open source cryptography, then you're good to go. And that's kind of how the internet's been built, and maybe previous digital payments rely on such kind of trustless cryptography. So the next generation should probably do the same.
And I think also, in the spirit of kind of defensive acceleration, you need a trustless, mathematically secure system to really achieve that DIAC North Star. So we truly believe that ZKPs are the way forward for this.
Yeah, I think just to summarize, I think they're the only solution that really holds up those tenets, and the next slides kind of assume basic knowledge of zero-knowledge proofs and what you can do with circuits, but we'll go into some of the details now.
So let's apply ZKPs to CBDCs. How will it look like? How will it work? But before we do that, let's take a step back and have a look at how the existing system works. And just by way of kind of background, I used to be one of the work at a bank. I was parachuted in from my New York law firm based in London. I was parachuted into Paris to help BNP Paribas deal with one of the biggest kind of sanction events that they've had in their history. So they were sanctioned 10% of their annual revenues, $9 billion, and my task was to just kind of help fix it and make sure it is prevented in the future. And that required working with a lot of compliance teams in the bank. So I have an in-depth knowledge as to how compliance works, even though I don't personally do compliance. I'm a lawyer. But the current model, the current AML combating financing terrorism model is inefficient, ineffective, and expensive. There is, as I have seen with my own eyes, significant manual labor involved in checking that everything is correct, and it's a significant cost. And actually, there's been a study done 4 years ago by Ronald Pole in an Australian University of Melbourne, and there was 4 key conclusions. One is that AML policy intervention is less than 0.1% impact on criminal finances. Its compliance costs exceed criminal funds, and frankly, taxpayers and ordinary citizens are penalized. And in Europe, AML requirements necessitate higher costs than actually the amount recovered from criminals by authorities. So, in short, cryptographic compliance is better than Herald, and there's a better way to do it.
Yeah, I think of kind of the old model as like it's reactive compliance. Something happens, someone checks it, and then they're like, hang on, something may be wrong here. You're always playing catch up. And I think In a ZKP model, we can kind of flip that on its head and do proactive compliance. What if you could bake into the actual transaction compliance checks that were completely privacy preserving? You'd be able to eliminate most of the kind of manual checks that happen today, and also make a system where kind of AML was much, much, much harder. If you haven't seen already, there's kind of proof of passports are now possible in ZKPs. There's a booth over in the kind of Devcon booth area where you can scan your passport and create a zero-knowledge proof of any e-passport to prove you're a member of that country, prove what your name is, your date of birth. You can even prove you're not on a sanctions list using this technology. And so the way this kind of works in practice is inside the logic of a transaction. Like you could take $1, I want to pay Andre some dollars. Before I pay him, I have to prove I'm not on a sanctions list. I can prove that my total monthly sends to all other users in the system are below 10K. And if all of those checks pass, all in complete privacy, I can send him $10. And so I think it's a much more elegant system because the transaction codifies the rules of the system, and you can still maintain strong privacy in the process.
And it's more effective, cheaper, quicker. I think that model will actually, banks will kind of realize that model is more effective and they'll actually gravitate towards it themselves. But how do we comply with laws, you might ask? Well, again, I think Joe explained, ZKPs can be used to comply with you can create a ZKP to comply. And the types of laws you will need to comply with is customer due diligence, enhanced due diligence, ongoing transaction monitoring, suspicious activity reporting, sanction screening, and our upcoming report for all you wannabe lawyers or if you really love reading really long tables and texts. We've actually mapped it out. We've actually looked at every single, we looked at some countries, the UK, Montenegro, Thailand, and Switzerland, to see how you could actually create a CBDC in those countries, complying with existing laws.
I think like sometimes, ZKPs or new ways of doing privacy preserving KYC and AML gets a lot of pushback. It's stuck in the present as this is not how it's done today. But I think the key point here is, the laws for CBDCs are still being written. There's only 3 that are live and there's none on a blockchain. So new laws have to be created to create this CBDC. And in the process, we can adopt a much better way of doing kind of KYC and AML and create a much better payment system as a result.
So for example, a snippet from our report, we go through every single law in the UK, Thailand, Switzerland, Montenegro, and map out how those laws can be codified in ZKPs. And interestingly, for example, in Thailand, there's a requirement for KYC if you make a transaction over 50,000 bahts. Again, you could have that as a structured so that if you go above that threshold, you need to provide some proof of passport. Go to the booth, check it out, and you could prove that you have an identity and you're KYC'd effectively. So again, I'll just go through the slides. We're not going to go into detail, but again, that's the selling point of ZKPs. You can automate it, make it cheaper, more effective, and future-proof.
I think one thing that always happens in these presentations is people talk about a technology that's a couple of years away. We'll have to do some pilots and test this out. But I think it's worth stressing that we can do this today, and there's enormous benefits from actually doing this on Ethereum. If we go to the next slide, I think for the last 8-10 years, the whole DeFi industry on Ethereum has been battle tested. Yes, there's been hacks, there's been issues, but we now have very robust trading venues such as Uniswap. We have hugely successful lending markets, Aave, Compound. All of this infrastructure already exists, and all it needs is real-world assets rather than kind of assets that are derived from the Ethereum kind of native currency or bridged assets like USDC, where someone else is kind of giving those assets value. I think like leveraging Ethereum's kind of legacy and all of the things that have already been created means it's the perfect place to launch one of these currencies.
Let's go to summary of key takeaways. If there's a few things that you come out of this talk, here are the things.
Yeah, I think I'll say this point again. You know, existing CBDC designs, especially if they're moved on chain, are a dystopia. You know, they're not a world that anyone, I think, who's come to Devcon wants to live in. And we have a chance to create that utopia, but we have to kind of put some of these learnings into practice. And yeah, as I said before, we can do this today on Ethereum. The technology exists. It's been iterated on for the last 3 to 5 years. ZKPs are performant enough to prove all the things that are needed today. And so we can make a much better financial system.
And I think the last point, I think the first mover advantage is absolutely underrated. And it is a huge opportunity for nations to effectively be the first and reap asymmetric geopolitical economic rewards if they launch a privacy-first CBDC on Ethereum. So stay tuned for our report, which is coming out, I think it's next week actually, and we're very excited to have given you some of our knowledge and our vision around this, and very much open to questions.
I think you can scan the QR code for questions, maybe.
All right, thank you, you guys. So we have a Q&A session. We see some questions pop up there already. All right, you guys want to start from the first question?
Maybe I can start and Andre can fill in. So one of the key requirements in kind of the Bank of England's kind of initial consultation for its digital pound was privacy. Like the Bank of England doesn't want to know what the citizens are up to. It wants to kind of have intermediaries that do that, other mechanisms that kind of ensure compliance. So in that case, yeah, the government doesn't expressly kind of do care about privacy, and they don't want to know about users' personal information because it leaves them open to another form of attack.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so part of our privacy first CBDC report that's coming out is actually built on the work we've done in trying to educate the Bank of England last year on how to design a CBDC with privacy by design. And I think it also ties into the second question. I think governments are realizing they need CBDCs because the current systems are fallible. They're slow. They're not 24-hour, and they want to go on chain, but on their terms. And we've actually tried to educate the Bank of England on focusing on ZKPs so that they have the best-in-class privacy by design.
Do you want to take the Eurozone one?
Can individual Eurozone members do a CBDC on their own by law? So, good question. I haven't, off the top of my head, I don't want to give an answer because I think there may be some MiCA issues. I know that they can. I know that they can consider doing that. Obviously, I mean, if they're not part of the Eurozone, if they have, for example, their own currency and they're not part of the Eurozone, they would have to obviously exit the Eurozone to launch their own CBDC, and then they could pass their own laws to enable that CBDC. So again, using Montenegro as an example, Montenegro is not part of the Eurozone, but if they were, they would have to leave it, and even if they were to issue a CBDC, they would have to change laws to enable the creation of a CBDC in any case. So the bottom line is, can individual Eurozone members do their own CBDC? Yes, because they can remove themselves from the Eurozone, pass laws that enable CBDC, and create their own future effectively.
Yeah, we got 40 seconds for the last one. A little bit spicy.
Very.
We're still working on Aztec. We're pretty close to testnet. So yeah, we'll be launching kind of the first programmable privacy network on Ethereum. You could use part of that to create these CBDCs. For me personally, like we get approached by a lot of people to work on CBDCs, then I just see it as an opportunity to not create the dystopia. Like there's kind of two paths in the road. We can stay in kind of like our crypto lane and pretend that we're all going to transact in Ethereum and like these assets, or we can try and bring this technology to the masses. And you know that's why I'm here. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
All right, that's awesome. You guys, give round of applause for the speakers on the stage, please. Thank you guys, amazing. Cool.